Hi, I'm a higher ed CMO and I have a confession to make. If I'm perfectly honest, I feel like pitching faculty experts is my favorite thing about the entire package of higher education. I just loved getting faculty in front of news media, getting their research stories told. It's just a phenomenal way to tell the larger institutional story. I'm so excited to bring to the show my friend of many years, Eden Bloss. She is currently the Chief Marketing Officer at UNC Asheville, where she has brought 2 decades of experience in strategic marketing and communications in both corporate and agency settings, including a depth of experience within the UNC system. We're going to be talking about how we can leverage faculty thought leadership on LinkedIn and in the media to help tell our institutional stories in a broader way. I hope you enjoy.
Our job is not to tell students what to think, it's to teach them how to think. And so, how can you use AI to increase efficiencies, but also think about how can I still have my authentic voice in this conversation, but at the same time, be really, really literate with the technology?
You're listening to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO with Jaime Hunt, your source for insight and inspiration on the issues shaping higher ed marketing. From AI and branding to enrollment strategy and leadership, each episode explores the ideas, challenges, and opportunities facing today's marketing leaders. Let's get into it. Hey, Eden, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jamie, for having me. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
I'm so excited for this conversation. I've known Eden for a long time. I think you started working in the UNC system in like 2017. Is that right?
That is right.
Yeah.
It's amazing to think that it's been that long, but yes.
I know, right? Right. That's almost 9 years. I just had to mentally do the math because that felt like, maybe 5 years. But no, that is 9 years ago. And you were working just down the road from me at UNCG while I was at Winston-Salem. We got together as communicators on a fairly regular basis. And I've just admired you for a long time. We're here to talk about something that I'm hoping listeners to the show forward to their faculty. I think that faculty are really hungry to understand how they can be more part of the public conversation and how they can be thought leaders and what kind of things they can do to elevate their profiles in that thought leadership capacity. And I wanted to talk with you because you've presented about this before. What role do you see faculty voices playing in a university's broader brand and reputation strategy?
Beyond LinkedIn, I think just having faculty expertise is so important from a credibility standpoint for your university. It's like sort of like any you think about force multipliers and third party testimonials. When you think about earned media, I feel like faculty are sort of your secret weapon when it comes to their areas of expertise. So it's a really great opportunity for your institution to get that visibility on a higher level. There's so many times I'm sure you've heard these great interviews on NPR, and they'll say, here's a professor on this specific area, and it's a conversation that's happening in the national narrative, and so someone's able to talk about NASA or whatever the topic may be, and then so you automatically connect with, wow, this is a really smart person talking about this really important matter. Oh, and they're associated with this institution. So I think that just from a holistic standpoint, it helps with awareness. It helps with your institutional brand as a reputable organization, not just in that space, but writ large. So I think there's a lot of different through lines. And then you think about the audiences that are paying attention to what these folks are saying. You think about potential students and parents and maybe grant funders. So there's a lot of different audiences that can benefit from their expertise as well as the institution itself.
I love pitching faculty experts. Like
Yes.
there's something like so thrilling when you're like, hey, New York Times wants to talk to you or CNN. I think we pitched somebody when I was at ODU around the wildfires and, having somebody on CNN to talk about that. I actually find that more rewarding in a lot of ways than pitching just like institutional news, if that makes sense. How do you feel about that?
First of all, I think one of the things that might be a misnomer is that faculty don't want to engage with the media. And
Hmm.
I think they do, they just don't know how, or there's some anxiety associated with what if, they say something negative about me. So I think that it's incumbent upon the comms folks to really educate and empower faculty. But what I will tell you is that when they do kind of get over that anxiety, they are your best friend. They
Yes.
want to talk to you. They're ready to do it. And then by extension, their colleagues are like, hey, wait a second. Like you were on BBC because of Eden? Let's go. Like I want to be on BBC. And so not only is it so exciting and fun, it's really, really cool to see. It's like when you teach a kid how to ride a bike and they can do it on their own. And then they're just off. I had a professor who I've been engaging with for some time. And he said, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention the New York Times called me. And I'm like, this is what I want.
Yeah.
I want you guys to not necessarily need me to pitch you, like, they're gonna come find you.
Yeah. And I get the anxiety. I've worked in the media relations space for 22 years, and I did an interview with Ad Age, which was a bucket list item. But I felt myself getting anxious. What if I say something? What if like I don't get to say like this is off the record or
Right.
and then I laid awake like the next night, like, did I say anything that makes me sound dumb? Like, and I've been doing this professionally for 22 years. So I totally get that anxiety. And that makes me wonder, like, do you feel like starting out with using something like LinkedIn for thought leadership is kind of a good way to dip your toe before you're doing those full on interviews with the New York Times or on CNN?
Yes, and I think that what is surprising to me, I mean, everything's evolving with AI and technology and how we engage as humans. I was reminiscing with someone the other day about like going for runs in the morning. It was just me, my dog, and the newspaper kid. And now, like, you don't get the newspaper. Like, I'm not competing with the newspaper delivery person because we don't have print like we used to. But LinkedIn, I just read a statistic, has surpassed 1.3 billion with a B total users, which blows my mind. So not only is it an opportunity for all of us to engage and communicate with one another, but for faculty, they can engage with their counterparts across the pond. And it's also really kind of a low stakes entry point. So you can put your CV out there, and what I like to do is sit down with faculty and say, here's how you set up a profile. And I think once you can kind of get them across that starting line, I think it's just sort of sometimes there's a little bit of a barrier to entry to just, getting a recent headshot, right? And so
Right.
there's basic fundamental pieces. We just had a headshot day here on campus. And so for faculty and staff. And so we offer these opportunities like, let us help you build these resources and have these tools so we can make it really easy for you. And I think LinkedIn, just in general, for us personally on our campus, is we're seeing much more engagement, not just with faculty, but also with students.
Oh, wow. Tell me more about that.
I think it's the job market. People know, hey, you know what? I really need to be in networks and be engaged. So, on a daily basis, I'm having and students on our campus engage with me and say, hey, can I join your network? And I've had students come into my office. But by the same token, faculty are engaging with students and saying, hey, you know what? We just did this awesome presentation out of state, and they're sharing that information on LinkedIn. And so we're just seeing much more engagement overall. And I think also there's platforms like X that the algorithm isn't as intuitive and maybe for lack of a better term engaged with as some of these others. And I think that there's a huge opportunity on LinkedIn. Also, we're seeing a lot of faculty members post their research and look for opportunities to say, hey, maybe I could, create a newsletter about what I'm doing. And it just takes a couple different faculty members to kind of take the lead and then others will follow.
Well, you make a great point for how students can get reached through the platform. And I think that faculty engaging on LinkedIn could be also seen as a recruitment tool for graduate students. People who are out there looking and researching a topic and seeing a faculty member talk about it. And there's some really phenomenal examples of faculty really leveraging LinkedIn in the UNC system. Like Kevin McClure at Wilmington is just like crushing it on LinkedIn
Yeah.
with his thought leadership. And to me, he's a real model of making that work and it being super successful.
Yeah, and I think that, another thing that's really neat about LinkedIn too is that for the introverts of the world, some of whom are on the faculty side, not everyone, it's also an opportunity to share your wisdom in an environment that feels comfortable to you. So you don't have to be on TikTok or create a really visual, platform. You can do it within the confines of your comfort zone and then build from there. So there's a way to be your authentic self. And to your point about researchers and students, and I think that for organizations and institutions that have a really robust graduate school program, which we don't, we have we really focus on giving actually undergraduate students opportunities to conduct that high level research in small environments. So, in fact, we had a recent student who partnered with a professor on our hard sciences side. His name is Jeremy Reck, and he's creating this is really cool solar panels that are flexible and they're made of plant based compounds.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So imagine you think about the different applications. So you think about the solar panels that you see on people's homes, on their roofs. The first word that comes to your mind when you see those is like not necessarily like, oh, that's aesthetically appealing. What he's doing is he's saying, you know what, this could be not only could be more attractive, it's lighter, it's less obtrusive, but also there's other applications. Think about people in the VA, maybe they have artificial limbs and those need power. Could we wrap a solar around that? Could we think about these different applications for this product? So his undergraduate researcher together, they were published in a scholarly journal when this before the student had even graduated. So there's huge opportunities. And then to your point, other students see, hey, wow, I could do that as an undergrad.
Mhm.
That's pretty cool. So being able also to personalize those stories is a huge opportunity. And I think LinkedIn is a really great platform to engage.
So, how do you work with faculty who are perhaps a little resistant or hesitant, or maybe those introverts? How do you convince them that LinkedIn or thought leadership in general isn't just self promotion, that it's something that they should do? What resonates with them?
Two things I would say. First of all, I meet them where they are. I think we have to recognize that there's everyone's got a different personality. These are all really really smart people, but where can I meet you where you are, and how can we go from there? So there's so many different faculty members that want to be engaged in again, like they don't know how necessarily. So what we've established here on campus is we have individual comms groups for the different administrative functions, for the different academic functions. And so what I will do, I'll work with the deans in like the School of Chemistry, for example, and we'll talk about so who are some of the different researchers who are doing some really interesting projects. And so I'll work with the top level folks, and they'll say, these are the different people who are doing really interesting work, and they'll give me sort of the background on them. And then what I'll do is they produce these spreadsheets about all the different research projects, and I'll look and I'll say, "Hey, you know what? This is really cool. This solar panel thing is really really cool." Or they're doing this really interesting research on hellbenders, which is a really it's a lizard in North Carolina. And then I'll reach out to them and say, "Hey, you know what? I just read this really cool report from Dean so and so about your research. Would you be willing to talk to me about it?" And I will tell you, it's basically like I've given them the best Halloween candy they've ever gotten in their life. They're
I
like,
love that.
you see me." And so I think what we as comms people don't maybe recognize is that they want to tell their story, they don't know how. And
Yeah.
so I think that meeting people where they are, but also getting genuinely excited and say, "Hey, you know what? Like, I'm so excited. Like, I had no idea that, this was an issue." And I just pitched one of our professors on the sustainability initiatives to talk about the drought here in North Carolina.
Mhm.
And she had just posted some information just on an internal network about here's some tips to save water. And even though we had rain yesterday, that doesn't mean we're out of the woods yet here, people. Like, here's what you should do. And I said, this is really cool. Can I pitch you to our local ABC affiliate? And she was like, let's go. And so we did it. And it was just me saying, hey, this is really interesting. This is in the conversation. You would be a great spokesperson. Are you down? And she was like, yes. And so there, for some professors, I'll give them media training. So I think at a fundamental level, it's working with the willing, but it's meeting them where they are.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things you're pointing to is kind of looking for those opportunities, not waiting for them to come to you, having your antenna up, and seeing this is posted on an internal network, or maybe you saw somebody's maybe you're friends with a faculty member on Facebook and they share something, or it's mentioned in a meeting, and mining those opportunities versus sitting and waiting for the faculty member to approach you and say like, "Hey, how can you help me with my thought leadership?" And that there are those that will come and do that, but for every one of those, there's 25 that never will.
And you know what's interesting too is that it's this domino effect. Just today, I had a gentleman reach out, and this is a biology professor. He said, "We're going out into the high desert with students for a Maymester event that it's sort of like this long distance field trip." But he said, "We're going to be doing research in the field, but I'm also encouraging my students to create content for social media while we're
Mm,
doing this. Would you be interested?" And he just wrote me directly, and I've never met this person personally. And I'm thinking, how did he like know this is a cool thing? And so I was like, let's go. And I think the other thing that is really important, at least for me personally, is I get back to them right away. If somebody's reaching out to me, it's courage to take that step, and just
yeah,
imagine if no one responded to you. So,
yeah,
my whole thing is, you know what? I'm gonna get back to you right away, even though commencement is in, a week, and we have 2 commencement ceremonies in 1 day this year, which is an experiment that we're trying for the first time. They don't care, right? Like, this is their focus, and so not that they don't care, but you know what? That's not factoring into their thought process. What matters to them is, "Wow, our CMO wrote me right back. She's excited. She looped in her social media person and her head of marketing. We're gonna do this." And
yeah,
so it's how do we create this conversation and this culture where we're all promoting one another for the collective good. And by extension, am I maybe opening a door for this person to get some funding? And
right.
another thing is once you have that content from a third party, like a TV station or an NPR or whatever, then you've got a link.
Mhm. Yeah,
And a link you can share with another, a person who maybe in your network. And one opportunity that opened up was with the Department of Energy for that professor I mentioned earlier in the conversation, Dr. Jeremy Rack. I had a colleague. I'm on the board of um, Public Ed Works, which is a 501(c)(3) here in North Carolina that promotes all the great work that public institutions are doing from K-12 through college. And so I had a colleague there, and I thought, you know what, he's got a lot of really good people that he knows up in DC. So maybe there's an opportunity there. So I forwarded it to him, and he said, "I've got a guy works at the Department of Energy. He would be all over this solar panel flexible technology that you're talking about. Can you connect me with that professor so I can get them together so we can talk about a grant?"
wow. That's amazing.
There's like hidden like little nuggets you didn't even know existed, but maybe we're opening a door that we didn't even know was there before. So I think there's infinite opportunities, but the only thing you know is that if you don't try, it's going to be the same. So why not? Right.
Right. Gonna hit pause for a second to share some awesome news. If you or your team are looking for practical strategies to crush operational bottlenecks and scale engagement with AI, then the Engage Summit 2026 in Charlotte needs to be your destination this June 15th through the 17th. From hands on sessions to main stage keynotes showing how AI transforms enrollment and retention, Engage Summit is the place to level up your institution's game in ways you probably didn't realize were possible. You'll walk away with tools, frameworks, and connections that actually move the needle, and people who will keep pushing you forward long after the conference ends. The good news, spots are still available. And the even better news, Enrollify listeners can get 50% off the ticket price. Yes, half off. Just head to engage.element451.com and use code HUNT50. That's HUNT50. Now back to the show. One of the things that jumped to my mind when you were talking about this is I'm currently the CMO at Agnes Scott, part-time on a fractional basis for the next couple of months, and they're launching a new universal AI initiative. And I thought, that's somewhat newsworthy, but where I actually thought that there was opportunity was in the thought leadership space. Like what is Agnes Scott offering this curriculum to develop AI fluency? what does that speak to the trend in higher education? How does that connect into the conversation around AI? How does that connect into the conversation around the liberal arts? What students should be majoring in? And instead of just pitching it as a story, which we did, um, we also have been pitching the provost as a thought leader to talk about the thought process that went into this. We're having the president write op-eds about how institutions need to be thinking about how they approach AI. And I think that there's a lot of things embedded in what might seem like little or not necessarily like nationwide news stories that are opportunities to showcase the talent, the expertise, the knowledge, the innovation that's happening on your campus through faculty voices, through administrator voices, versus through just like the news, if that makes sense.
It does 100%. And I think that coming at AI from a new angle is really smart because I think everyone's talking about the Jeff Salingos of the world. And we were in his recent book, Dream School, talking about, what are the institutions that maybe you don't know about that are also excellent for, for your rising senior to look at as potential schools because then you're not going to come away with debt. So, like the Agnes Scotts of the world have such great reputations. And when we think about AI, I think that there's a lot of conversation about what does that mean for the liberal arts
Mhm.
and what are the implications. So, if you can come at it and say, you know what, actually, it's even more important to have these soft skills around AI. And
Right.
because our job is not to tell students what to think, it's to teach them how to think. And so how can you use AI to increase efficiencies, but also think about how can I still have my authentic voice in this conversation, but at the same time be really, really literate with the technology. And if you have a leader who can talk about that and deftly navigate that conversation, that that is gold.
Yeah. Well, and I think that having this conversation, you expect the Purdue's, the Virginia Techs, the Georgia Techs to be part of a conversation around AI. I think there's this idea that like this is technology, so it makes sense for engineers and computer scientists and all of those folks to weigh in. But there's also philosophical conversation. There's also economic impact conversation. There's also environmental conversation. When you see a vacuum where there's not necessarily conversation happening on that specific angle, that's a great time to, like, dig in and see where you have expertise on your campus, that can speak to that, and that can get you a lot of leverage because, again, reporters aren't looking to regurgitate stories that have already been told, they wanna have a different angle, and if you can give them that, I think they're pleased. But I wanna go back to this sort of strategy for working with faculty. How are you providing training for faculty, like media training or giving them guidance on how to leverage LinkedIn? And how does that look?
Yes, yes, we definitely do. And so it's really fun because I think one of the things that faculty are trying to get their heads around is, how can I extend the reach of my work? And so there's definitely an appetite there for it. I have to tell you a cute story. One of our faculty members was really, really excited about this new project that she had been working on. She said, so, Eden, you're gonna be so proud of me. I posted on LinkedIn and I tagged us. And I said, "That's excellent. I must have missed it." And so instead of tagging us with the A sign, with the circle around, she did hashtag. And so
Oh,
I was like, "Oh, your heart's in the right place." And so I think that you also have to be careful not to hurt people's feelings. Say, "I see what you did, but how about we do this next time?" Or, if you go to the drop down menu, you'll find us, but also find this department. And so they're so open and excited to be included in these conversations. And what I have found personally is working with smaller groups individually is really, really productive. And
mm,
they can help one another. And they can support one another. And then the people who have a little more experience within that department can help teach and coach the other folks. And then they also will repost. And that's another
mhm,
thing that I've encouraged faculty members when I present at different deans forums and things of that nature. I'll say, if you're new to the platform, let's lower the bar for your entry. Get comfortable, like something, engage with us, follow us. Start where you feel comfortable, and then let's work from there. And then we can take that content that you want to post, and we can collaborate with you. And then eventually the training wheels come off probably sooner than any of us would anticipate. And again, they're doing so much more work than they share oftentimes. So it's just an opportunity, to your point earlier, about being really proactive and staying really, really positive. Wow, I saw you did this really cool thing. Would you be willing to talk about it? And coming back around to the AI conversation, we're actually hosting an AI conference here on campus at the beginning of June, and we're bringing in all of these different voices, some of whom are faculty members from our campus, as well as App State and Western Carolina. So I think the other thing that's really important in this ecosystem is we can all help one another and learn from one another, and share and repost and engage together, and that helps with the algorithm.
I love that. And I love this idea of we're all in this together as higher ed. Like, I think the silos that we often have as institutions where it's like, this is my territory and I'm not necessarily going to collaborate because that diminishes me. And I'm putting that in air quotes. I feel like the attitude of we are all here to share knowledge, to build up higher education, to prepare students for the future, fill in the blank, fill in the blank. And when we can work together to accomplish those things, I think it goes so much farther. And so I adore the idea of sharing across colleges as well. Like, hey, this is an interesting thing that my colleague at a different university wrote or said or had a piece on, and elevating that. I think this idea of sort of amplifying voices on your campus and amplifying your colleagues across the country, there's not really a downside to it. Like what would be bad about resharing somebody's op-ed on a topic? And speaking about op-eds, I'm really curious, what does your team do in terms of guidance on things like op-eds or interviews on potentially sensitive topics? Are you giving them some coaching? Are you ghostwriting anything? Are you reviewing anything? How does that work at UNC Asheville?
You know this as well as I do. Whenever anything's sensitive, we bring in the general counsel. So if there's something that's super sensitive, that may or may not be a separate conversation. But if a faculty member is not comfortable speaking on a topic, and we've had this situation come up before, something of a political bent that they don't feel like they want to step into, I say, you know what? That's you are not obligated. There's no repercussion for you not wanting to participate in this opportunity. If you're not available, you're not available. So
Mhm.
we'll coach them that way. And what's great here is that they know how to reach me. They have my mobile phone. They'll text me, say, "Hey, you have a second? I want to talk this through with you. I have this opportunity." We also will go ahead and work with them on talking points. So if for instance a reporter says, "We want to do this interview with you," and it's just a Q&A, and so we'll work with them on some of those responses. If it's an on-camera interview, we'll do some like sort of a dry run of prep. Say, "Hey, you know what? Here's a little bit about this reporter. Here's the background. Here's the event." So sometimes it's a really positive interview, and we're excited about it. And other times we know the publication, and we know that that reporter's kind of already written that story, and we know the narrative, and saying no comment is not an option. So here's what we can say. And so we'll work with them one-on-one in those different cases. For op-eds, it kind of varies. With one of our professors, I work with her directly, and I know her, and she's an excellent writer, really, really adept at navigating conversations. And so she wanted to do an op-ed, and I just work with her, and I said, "Okay, well, here's how the process works. Here's how many words. Here's the deadline. Here's some examples of what other people did in the past. So you have a litmus to kind of look at some prior examples." She put together a draft. We worked on it together. I gave her my edits. It got published, and it was a hit. It depends on the professor, but I think that one of the things that it's incumbent upon us, especially on a small campus, is to really empower faculty to be team players with us. Say, we want to help you with this. If we don't have the bandwidth to write something, say, "Hey, you know what? Let's get us to the 30-yard line. Like, you start something, and we'll collaborate with you." And other instances, if we have more of a longer lead time, we can start the narrative. So it sort of varies from professor to professor and situations. But my whole thing is I say yes to everything. It's not yes, we'll do everything. It's yes, I absolutely want to help, and here's what I can do. But I say yes to everything when it comes to faculty.
Oh, I love that. That is interesting. How does your team feel about that?
Well, they've learned to live with me. And also, I'm not forcing that on anybody else. If that's my
Okay.
decision, then, I take responsibility for it. But what's great is that coming into this role, I haven't been here quite a year yet. It was a huge opportunity for this department, which didn't necessarily have an internal brand of, hey, Marcom is the place you go when you need help. And so I really wanted to create a new narrative. And at the beginning, I think you sort of have to overcompensate and say, and as I was saying before, respond right away, be engaged, show up at, faculty and staff Senate meetings, be visible, be helpful, be a resource. And those are sort of the three tenets of how all of us interact. So I think that, it starts off maybe feeling like, oh wow, this feels like a lot. But it's so worth it. And then again, back to that training wheels example, then they can ride the bike on their own.
I'm curious, how do you measure the success of all this yes? How do you know that it's working and that it is a good investment of your time?
There's no better grade, for lack of a better term, than data.
Mm,
So when we're measuring share of voice or how many professors we're getting in the media or how we're performing on social media across our platforms, how are we engaging? We have also in the midst of all of this work, not just on social media, we've also done a total website migration. And so one of the things that is really exciting is to see not only the engagement, which we have measured and it's gone off the charts, like our engagement is 300% across the board on our social media platforms. When we look at our website traffic specifically, what's really, really interesting is when we work with a professor on a story, subsequent to posting that story with the earned piece or with the op-ed, we see unbelievable traffic to their page. So we're including hyperlinks. And so we're tracking as those stories hit, how are they performing? And so we look at all those metrics on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, internally on our teams. We have a team meeting, an editorial meeting every Monday morning. We have an internal group meeting every Wednesday morning. And so we're checking in and constantly staying on top of that. So I think there's the numbers piece, but then there's also just the anecdotal and organic. So the example that I gave you earlier on the call was when we're talking about professors that are just coming out of the woodwork who I've never met, who are reaching out and saying, hey, I've heard from this other professor that you're doing this work. I thought you might be interested in this new research project. And so the professors that are coming and reaching out to me independently, and they're not copying anybody else, it's just me they're
mhm.
ready to. So I know that the word is getting out anecdotally, which to me actually is more gratifying.
There's a story in there to tell leadership that I think can help make investments in making sure that faculty have the resources that they need and perhaps, some additional resources for you to be able to pitch them more broadly or that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I love that you're using data to tell that story.
I also like to brag on them.
Mm,
And so another thing that we do here internally, and this is something that I started when I joined, we created an internal newsletter. And so UNC Asheville, our mascot is a bulldog. Our newsletter is called the Weekly Wag. Yes, I know it's very cute. And so we have a bulldog mascot. And so that publication is issued every single Monday morning to all faculty and staff across campus. And in a section of that newsletter, we have staff highlights and
mm,
faculty highlights. So I will give a shout out to Professor so and so who was on this television show or participated in this NPR interview or published this paper. And so we're constantly reinforcing this message of faculty are doing great work. Here's an example. In addition to that, I also share specific links like in the moment. So I don't wait till Monday to share it with the provost or the dean of that department. And then I'll copy in that professor. And I thank the professor for making the time to do the interview. Because as you and I both know, in an academic setting, we work on semesters, but media often works in seconds. So you'll get a call from a reporter. I'm on my way to campus. Can you have somebody in 30 minutes? And we're like, wait a minute, they're in the class. So for a professor to take a step away from their pedagogy or a student conference or whatever other major thing they have going on, to take the time to focus and to meet with a reporter, that is huge. That is huge. And so I don't let an opportunity like that go by without saying thank you, giving them that public recognition and sharing it with their bosses so they know right away about this great work.
If you're a listener and you don't already have something like this, we launched something like this at WSSU and we called it the Kudos Report. And we sent it out, I think, every other week. And it is such a great place to get story ideas because faculty will submit like their couple sentence that they spoke on at this conference or whatever. They were, won this prize or whatever. And in a lot of cases, those were stories we weren't surfacing in any other way. And when we rolled out this kudos report, there was one faculty member who made it into almost every single one. Like you could tell it was important to him, but they feel good. Their colleagues are congratulating them. And you're mining story opportunities out of that. It's super easy to like, you can have a form set up on your website where they can submit stuff. Like this doesn't have to be rocket science. But you can get those stories. And another thing I'd say for getting those stories is I think you could build. I built a couple pilots of this, a custom GPT that can scrape all the department websites so that when a Department of Biology posts a news story or something, you don't have to physically go to all of your academic department's websites. You can have, this custom GPT scrape all of those sites and send you an email on Mondays or whatever that's like, these are all the stories from the last week. And to go one step further, one of my pilots had, let's see what reporters are talking about those topics that you might be able to pitch to, or how might they connect to a national trend. Suddenly all these things that you have all intentions to do, to go to these websites and mine these stories, is just getting delivered to you through this custom GPT. Faculty are such a treasure trove.
Brilliant idea. I love that idea.
Yeah, go do it. I
Yeah,
love
no,
it.
it's and to your point, I mean, that's what we're doing. We're creating content because without the content, there's no scraping, right? You're not
Right.
scraping for anything. And so I think that as we look at the evolving landscape of media, what we grew up with was, oh, we got to pitch the Washington Post and the New York Times and USA Today and other publications that may or may not still be in existence, right? So we can get much more bang for our buck on other digital channels these days. But it's also incumbent upon us to have that to be content creators. So when media outlets are looking for content or experts, they have somewhere to look and to find that information. And then and actually this week, I did get a reach out from BBC, and it was interesting because I mentioned this to my chancellor, and I said, "Oh yeah, actually the BBC reached out this week," and she's like, British public, like she was sort of incredulous, like, why would they be interested in us? I'm like, because we're awesome. Like, and we were talking about this really interesting topic that resonated with them. So there are opportunities that, I mean, obviously I wouldn't necessarily think, hi, no, I'll pitch the BBC today. But then they can find you.
I love your enthusiasm. One of the things I'll say I've always liked about Eden is just she's like a bundle of energy, a bundle of like positive enthusiasm. I love that. Eden, we're ending every episode with this question. What is your higher ed hottest take?
So I love this question. And for me in this moment, mentoring. Think that today it's so important for students to be equipped in how to handle not just one thing, so many things. When we were looking for jobs, and I don't want to speak for you, I remember thinking, okay, yeah, I can write and I can communicate orally, and there's a couple of different skill sets here that they're looking for, and I can do that. Today, they're being asked to not only write, but they have to know social media, they have to know Canva, they have to know WordPress. So you have to create a video, create a website, communicate verbally, communicate orally. And how do they navigate this new space? And so much of our education coming through is oftentimes theoretical, but what about practical? So I want to make sure that I sit down with students on a weekly basis. I have 5 interns right now all across campus. I'm meeting with students. What's really interesting is on my LinkedIn, I have student athletes reaching out saying, "Can I join your network?" They're sharing their portfolios with me. So I just want to inspire the next generation to be the best versions of themselves, and any kind of resources that I can provide. I provide recommendations for students. I've hired since the same person who was my social media manager at UNCG, she came with me to my predecessor position before this one. I brought her with me and she's flourishing. I advocate for people, especially women in this space. I really want to make sure that they feel empowered and encouraged and see all the potential that they have within themselves. At the end of the day, if I can help someone get a job, I've won the day.
I love the sweetness of this hot take. Like, it's such a wholesome hot take. I love it so much. I think that's the best part of working on a campus, and when I went out on my own, I knew I had to start teaching because there was just no way I was gonna be able to get around working directly with students. Like, it's just the reason we do all this, right? They're on the cusp of their future, and, I just love that so much. Eden, if people wanna chat with you, where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, but also on the UNC Asheville webpage. You can find my email on the comms website. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn, though. I think I'm the only Eden Bloss out there.
That's amazing. That's really lucky. It's like a name that's only you. I love it. Listeners, as always, you can find me on LinkedIn at Jaime Hunt, JaimeHunt. Yes, I am named after the Bionic Woman. You can also find me on my website at solvehighered.com. If you're interested in chatting about a custom GPT, like we just talked about, feel free to reach out. And you can also send me an email at jamie@solvehighered.com. And as always, let's go bust some silos. Listeners, can I ask you a quick favor? If you enjoy this show, take a moment to give it a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'm a type A eldest daughter, so positive feedback is basically my love language. I also genuinely love hearing from listeners. You can find me at LinkedIn at Jaime Hunt. That's JaimeHunt. And yes, I am named after the Bionic Woman. You can also find me at solvehighered.com. Say hello, share a thought, pitch an idea. Don't be shy. I genuinely love hearing from you.